The concept of a terrible tower that the developers refused to buff is not new to the TTS. We had many examples like post-Overhaul Mortar and Rocketeer that stayed bad for quite some time before getting the justified rework, or Hunter that was also mediocre for pretty much its entire history, but at least it got a rework and is actually decent for new players. However, the tower of today's video has been abysmal for its entire history except for just a couple of days. The tower in question is Paintballer, and today I will explain the history of Tower Defense Simulator's biggest joke. Stay tuned, because the story of this tower is truly wild. Paintballer was supposed to release 14 June 2019. It was during the first TTS update called Beta version 1.0.0. The way you would get this tower at that point of time wasn't actually with coins, as you may think, but Paintballer was initially a code tower, just like Hunter for a long time. The code was John Roblox, with all letters capitalized, and it actually leads to another fact about Paintballer. It was a creation of John Roblox. Knowing John's personality and the concept of paintballs in a serious tower defense game, you might think that Paintballer is a joke tower, and you would be absolutely correct. Paintballer was indeed and still is a joke tower, and later on this will be the cause of his downfall. But for now, he was a semi-decent early to mid-game crowd control tower with splash damage at level 5, and yes, before his first change, his first 4 levels didn't even splash. And you might also see the niche Overhaul with Demoman, who was also added in the same update. Oh, and Demoman also completely outclassed Paintballer due to having superior stats at almost everything. In fact, this situation continued for the rest of the tower's history, except for one moment. A couple days later, Paintballer was rebalanced, increasing the overall cost of the tower and decreasing range and fire rate, but upgrading everything else along with adding splash to the rest of his levels. The change was overall decent, especially for the splash bars, but the moment still remained as a superior choice as you might have expected. Paintballer was also a shop tower now, costing 750 coins, as its coin John Roblox expired. It was clear that Paintballer still needed help to be at least somewhat viable, and so, a month later, new balances arrived. The cost of the tower was overall heavily decreased, making it much more usable, specifically in early game. Its shop cost was also decreased down to 150 coins, now making it cheaper than Zimmerman, back then which costed 500 coins, and the cheapest tower in the game overall. However, the general strategy for beginners was to skip Paintballer and go straight for Zimmerman if you wanted a recrawl controller. Few months later, he received yet another balancing, where his range was massively increased, along with slight damage increase and cost reduction on the final level. However, his fire rate was also nerfed heavily. He also got the splash damage buff that all splash damage towers, including his competitor Zimmerman, got. The splash damage previously used to deal half of the direct attacks damage, but now it was equal. If you don't know what direct damage is, it doesn't really matter because it got removed later in December. What can I say? Decent buff, but it still remained as an inferior option to Zimmerman. For the rest of the time, before the dreaded Overhaul update, he got 2 skins, a red one and a bunny one. These were the only skins he would get for a really long time. And so, the Overhaul update arrived that changed a lot of towers, for better or more commonly, for worse. Paintballer was one of the towers affected and, his changes were weird. He got a good fire rate buff on levels 4 and 5, along with cost reduction on level 1, but they removed his hidden detection. I have no idea what was the point of this change. To make this even worse, Demonman had no hidden detection neither, so they just removed the only upside of Paintballer compared to him. They also remade splash damage, where enemies would take less damage the farther they are from the explosion, which makes sense, but it still hurt Paintballer even more. Lastly, there were 2 bugs where projectiles with explosions were invisible, and explosion range was 5 on all levels, making it massive. For comparison, Timomai Splash was only 3 on final level, and this bug stayed for years by the way. So that's a win for Paintballer, also he was still an inferior option to most if not all crowd controllers. Top it with explosion changes, essentially nerfing all splash towers and removal of hidden detection, and Paintballer was once again a choke tower not meant to be used seriously. Around half a year later, the Frost Invasion update, they gave Paintballer different bypass on his attacks, and also reworked splash damage again, for it to decrease linearly rather than onset points of 100, 75 and 50% of damage compared to center proximity respectively. Didn't really change much because most if not all splash towers had bypass defense before that anyway. If you like the video so far, please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already, this would really help me out, thanks. At 12 March of 2022, he got a couple of quality of life changes and an invisible projectile bug fix. At 31st of May 2024, and yes, 2 years went without any changes to him, they removed his defense bypass. Why? Ask them, I don't know. At 7 June of the same year, they added the last until the day skin, the green Paintballer. So funny, am I right guys? Despite being a recover, he is a premium skin, with a legendary rarity because like green Paintballer, like green towers, very funny, am I right guys?
Oh my god.
A couple of days later, this specific skin lost weapon ensured for levels 3 to 5, making him unable to shoot and making the skin pay to lose. I have no idea how they managed to break it without touching it. Paintballer also no longer received damage boost, which was another bug. So yeah, Paintballer was at a horrible state. As towers got released and game mode reworked, he was a punching bug of the community. There were literally 0 use cases for him. He was truly a joke. A sick, hopeless joke. But he got his revenge. 19 July 2024, the return of Paintballer. He received severe buffs that increased his damage, decreased his fire rate, and made his splash deal the same amount of damage everywhere in the explosion. He even got his hidden detection back. This came at the cost of severely nerfing his range, removing with detection, and increasing his cost on almost all levels. And one was introducing the bug where he dealt no damage at level 0. But the buffs outweighed everything. He was used in a lot of game modes, specifically Fallen, where he was finally animated early to meet game's shredder that Timmerman couldn't even dream of. His best usage was carrying the Solo Infernal Abyss, where the early game was much easier thanks to him. He was unstoppable. But nothing ever lasts forever. Same for Paintballer. Only 4 days later, there was a bug that made him deal no damage at every single level. This was fixed a day later, along with a devastating change. He had a pierce cap of 3, meaning that his splash could only hit 3 enemies instead of infinite. He got the Gladiator treatment. They also fixed his big splash bug to add salt to the wound. Paintballer instantly returned back to being a joke, now being a fake splash damage tower that could no longer do its intended job. Timmerman came on top once again. Later in August, they attempted to help him out by fixing the no damage bug and increasing his pierce cap to 5, while also buffing his splash range on all levels. But it was pointless. He was back to square one, back to being a sick, hopeless joke. He lasted 4 days. At 25th September of 2024, the shop cost was decreased to 100 coins. At 6th November of the same year, the green skin bug was fixed. Yes, It wasn't fixed during his prime. A missed opportunity in my opinion. And this was the last change Paintballer has received. Outside of PvP releases I do not care about. What can I say? This tower history is probably one of the most interesting ones in the game. He was a joke tower for its entire existence before becoming a beast for 4 days, before returning to a joke status. And the joke status was the reason why he never got serious buffs outside of that, or why devs didn't try to make him useful. They wanted him to remain as a joke. Even his shop description hints at that. Now, there is actually a Paintball rework confirmed, and I do hope that will help him out to stop being a joke tower and actually do something other than being a meme. But until then, he will remain as a sick, hopeless joke.